John Walsh is the Director of Human Capital Strategies at GP Strategies and is also a recognized thought leader in the area of human capital investment and performance improvement. John is best known for leading complex organizations through periods of change by creating strategies to solve complex business issues that drive profitability, enhance organizational engagement, and build collaborative relationships within an organization to consistently drive growth and change. John holds a degree in accounting from St. John's University, along with 2 master's degrees, and most recently finished his PhD in organizational leadership from Capella University. He is also an adjunct professor at several major universities, teaching in their master's and PhD programs. He enjoys spending time at home and traveling with his wife and 3 adult children. He also keeps a full schedule visiting clients, officiating high school and college football, golfing, and deepening his understanding of human capital investment and the secrets of top performers across various disciplines. So with that, John, I'm going to turn presenter rights over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kayla. And thank you all for coming. We're going to talk about some fun things today, but talk about some hard stuff that may be outside your control, but is important to understand so that you can have the necessary conversations with the people who make the investment in human capital, like the CFO, like your COOs, and like your budget and financial people. Also, if you can understand some of the concepts that we're going to talk about today, maybe and just maybe, together we can start to change things. So hang in there with me on this, and together we might be able to help make things change. So our goal today is to understand the practical tools and indicators that our business leaders and our investors, and most importantly our stakeholders, need to objectively assess the value of an organization's talent and people management practices, as well as assist our organizations in developing a framework for measurement for human capital. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the definition of human capital, but before we do that, let's talk about some of our learning objectives here, since I have dove into academia a little bit, and they forced me to have learning objectives. So to better understand how developing and managing people releases and drives value, we want to really particularly understand how that happens as we want to measure this human capital effort. We're going to talk about and clearly define the basic metrics for valuing talent and how to promote agreement and consistently measure those processes. And lastly, we'll talk about how we can, in our organizations, develop a broad framework against which our executives and employees and investors and others can assess how businesses of all kinds are developing their people and organizations to sustain higher performance. In today's world, we're all about performance and all about business outcomes, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And to assist in understanding human capital investment, we need to discuss how we value this talent first and how to understand how we measure talent acquisition. So one of the things I like to do is I understand that we all have different learning styles, and so I'd like to have Kayla sort of administer a poll so that I might be able to tailor the rest of the presentation based upon who we have in the audience today. So, Kayla, would you like to do that?
Yep. So the poll should be started. Everyone has we have about a minute that we're going to go ahead and keep this open, and it looks like there are quite a few answers coming in here. So we'll go ahead and show our answers here shortly. So while we're doing that, let's sort of set a baseline for how we're going to talk about human capital and human capital investment. So based upon my research and based upon my talking in the business world,
I threw out a couple things here for potential definitions around human capital and what human capital means. So human capital means all productive investments in a person, such as the ability, skill, expertise, and health as a result of investment towards education, professional development, training, and healthcare, which is very important today. Human capital growth, mainly through education and professional development, is one of the largest sources of economic growth that we have today, both in the past and in the future. And based upon most current research, human capital has made a larger contribution to most countries' growth compared to any contribution in factories or physical property. So human capital, although not tangible, where we can't touch it, and we're going to talk a lot about that today, will always be our most valuable asset in the individual. So let's take a look at our poll here a little bit. We see that it's sort of spread out. So I'll try to do the best I can in crafting the rest of the presentation based upon our poll, which shows that the majority of people have some just getting started in measurement possibilities, and the majority of people have some influence on measuring and influencing the development of measuring. So we'll see what we can do with that from a crafting this perspective. So what I'd like to do is start off by showing some objective data, and this objective data might help us a little bit in understanding the measurement of human capital investment. And this is the current PwC Global CEO Survey, showing about how concerned these CEOs are with the basic threats in their organization. And we can see the arrow is that the availability of skills is the second most business threat to the organization. So it's important, and we can see on the bottom how these threats have been increasing over the years. If we go to the next slide, and this one is important from a measurement perspective, we can see that data mining and analysis is key, and that's where the measurement and the objective measurement of human capital comes in. So we need to take the information that we currently have and mine that and help measure the human capital around that. Next, we have the over half the CEOs plan to increase headcount in the coming year. So this poll was taken, and it's a 2015 poll. It was taken in early in 2015, so that we see that 51% are going to increase their headcount. And this one-size-fits-all approach, for getting talent really doesn't work anymore, and companies are employing a diverse range of strategies to find and develop the people that they need. And skills, as we saw, are on the top of the list for the CEO's talent agenda. So moving to the next slide, we see where a lot of us in our backgrounds come in for learning and development is a particular focus, where we see that CEOs are using a diverse range of strategies to go find the mix of talent that they have, and you can see whether they're to the extent they agree and disagree with the following statements in the organization. We always equip employees with new skills through continuous learning and mobility programs. We can say 56%. Look at a broader range of skills when hiring that we did in the past. 58% agree. And we are always looking at multiple channels to find talent, and we actively search for talent in different areas. So again, the one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. And as we can see the quote from Michael Dell, from curiosity comes learning and new ideas. And the more we can develop and hone our skills through learning and professional development, the better off we're going to be. In our next slide, we talk about more than anything, the CEO stressed that, the soft skills in leadership. They spoke of the need for vision and the agility and flexibility in decision making. They highlighted, as you can see, the importance of being curious about their business world, even when sometimes they prefer to stick their heads in the sand and hope changes passes them by. Being curious gives the CEO the insight to separate real change from the temporary hype that we see today and act decisively based on real change. But above all, through all this, perhaps the qualities that CEOs most like to see is humility. Being humble while becoming a leader, a CEO is able to see his organization listen and learn from the team that they can build around them. And they'll be receptive to the insights that they can gain from their workforce and their associates and their employees. And this humility gives not only the CEOs but also corporate leaders the confidence to pass on what they've learned to the next generation of leaders that we're hoping we can create through the measurement of human capital investment. And this is one of the main reasons that we need a measure. So if we skip a year back, we can see that not a lot has changed. This is the 2014 survey, and we can see that the strongest thing here is that the CEOs were looking for was creating a skilled workforce, and we can also see that ensuring financial sector stability and access to affordable capital. And that affordable capital we're going to talk about it relates to human capital. So we can see in this next slide to what extent are CEOs currently making changes in the following areas in order to capitalize. Talent strategies is number one. Organizational structure, which relates to these talent strategies, is number two. Technology investments, which is the data mining we've talked about, and the use of data analytics. These are all important to how we're going to measure this human capital. So will skills confound the U.S. CEO's plans to expand? And we can see that 70% of the U.S. CEOs are concerned about availability of skills, and 62% plan to hire. We all see that the unemployment rates have been coming down over the last couple of years. However, we've also seen that the skills gap and the lack of appropriate skills and talents to fill those jobs. So again, this is where we need to measure how we spend our precious dollars in human capital investment. And I think this is a very important slide, critical to achieving the business outcomes, and we don't want to do anything unless we have business outcomes coming first. Percent of line leaders reporting that learning and development function is critical to business outcomes. 24% agree or strongly agree. We certainly like to see that number higher. So we certainly need to prove that learning and development and professional development has strong value. We're competing with other parts of the organization for those capital dollars. And while the CFO looks to us in learning and development to bring not just anecdotal measures to them to secure capital, but objective data to do that. So to get back into the humorous side a little bit, there's from Josh Burson, who's at Deloitte. We can see today, one would argue that the war is over and the talent is won. The degree of talent and how we hire today has basically flipped from even, say, 3 to 4 years ago, where the talent has sort of the leverage today. So we need to make sure that when we do spend that capital on our investments, that it's the right way to do it. So what can our organizations do to do that? What can we do to attract the best talent? What can we do to retain our best talent? And we're going to talk more about how we do that through the measurement of human capital. So having our organizations have a strategy driven with integrated talent management functions has significant advantage over the siloed counterparts. If we can focus this human capital, hopefully you'll get 26% higher revenue per employee, 40% lower turnover among our higher performers, 87% greater ability to hire the best people. So if we can show why investing in our most important asset to our not only our learning leaders, but also our chief financial officers, we're going to be able to make better hiring decisions and better decisions on how we retain our people. So how do we retain people? Employees, they don't want to be retained. You know, they want to feel valued. They want to feel empowered, and they want to understand that they're in a culture where they can fit. So that brings us to our big data. We need to understand, you know, why our people leave. We need to understand when do they leave and for what reasons do they leave. So maybe we've seen this before, but I think it's important to address again. The CFO asked the CEO, what happens if we invest in developing our people and then they leave us? And the CEO asked, what happens if we don't and they stay? So this is a very important question. It's the what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And it's important that we understand how we do that, because we've got purpose, and we need to appeal to their hearts and not just their minds about why they're here. So this is all about leadership, and it starts at the top, and it starts with us. And leaders too often lack the right talent and preparation to sustain the impact. So we need to make sure at the end of the day that we put all the pieces together, that we have pockets of excellence, that we focus on our performance and our business outcomes on excellence, that we get not just good enough in our organizations, but that we get operational excellence in our organizations. And leadership is how that happens. And part of leadership is we've historically treated the expenditures of our most valuable asset, which is intangible assets, and that's our human capital, which does not reside on the balance sheet. We see that if we look at some of the most valuable companies like Apple and Google, and we look at their balance sheets, the human capital is not on a balance sheet, and it's looked at as an expense and not as an asset. And this asset is not part of our GNP. And this exclusion basically distorts the important role that talent and operational excellence and even the innovation process play in our economic growth, both as a country and as in our organizations and as individuals. So the question to be asked and investigated is, should intangibles be treated as capital or as an expense? And this problem has been going on for a long time, and our existing measures, exclude much of the investment in knowledge capital, which is a large portion of approximately 80% in the United States about what's happening today from an economic growth. Like it or not, we're a service sector and a service industry today, and we need to move from using resources that reduce current consumption in order to increase it in the future qualities as an investment. So to do that, I'd like to show a short video that I had the opportunity to work with some large organizations, the OECD and some European organizations to put together that might help explain a little bit what I'm talking about. And to do that, I'd like to have Kayla take over here and show this a little 2-minute video.
Yep, thanks, John. I'll go ahead and play, but just as a heads up to everybody on the call, this will be playing through your computer or the device that you're logged into the WebEx from, not from the teleconference line. So just as a heads up, if you are only on the teleconference line, you may not be able to hear it for the next 2 minutes. If that's the case, then we will send you a link after the session. But I will go ahead and get this started.
So I hope that sort of helped clear some of the fog, if you had any, about what we were talking about, because we're going to the next couple slides will talk about some of the financial accounting rules that are helping to stall some of the investment in human capital that is allowing us not to measure. So if we look at it from a country or a nation state perspective, intangibles are treated as an intermediate input, and the spending on intangibles is subtracted from revenue as an expense. That may seem logical, but what's the first thing that many organizations cut when times get tough, and that's professional development costs and training costs. So from an organization perspective, spending in intangibles, learning and development is treated as an expense, and as you would expect, most executives act to minimize expenditures to control costs, and that's rational to limit those things that affect the bottom line. But what is not rational is that the current models explaining value creation is counter to that. And when times are tough, investing in people may be the right decision. So we need to shift from this expense perspective to an investment perspective in investing in our people. An example I'd like to use is if you use your professional development funds, and many organizations have professional development expenditures for their people, and if it were looked at as an expense and you had a calendar year or fiscal year of December 31st, at the end of the December 31st, does all that information and all that learning that they spent on you during the year get sucked out of your head? Well, of course it doesn't. But yet it's treated as an expense, and it comes off the P&L at the end of the year. So these executives have the potential to increase their value, and including human capital, by managing their expenditures of learning and development as an investment. And that's what, as a country and as even across the globe, we're trying to get changed, is to move from an expense to an investment, which is meaning putting it on the balance sheet. And to do that, we need to change executive behavior around that, and the ability to execute. And, in order to capture the value and increase capital, we need to get the executive behavior to change. And most of us here on this call, this may be outside our control, but it's important for us to understand how these investment decisions are made, because they require measurement both from a risk and return perspective. And so the good news is progress is being made, that people are finally starting to realize that there is investment in people has lifetime income, and there's been research around it by Jorgensen and Fraumini back as early as 1982 about education's creation as an asset. From a firm level, human capital investment measurements methods include both a return, that increase in organizational value measured by using experimental design, propensity scoring of comparison groups, which we'll talk about when we talk about our framework for measurement, and using multivariate statistical analysis to isolate the learning variable in the measurement of human capital. And then we have the risk side, you know, things like voluntary turnover, different HR policies and procedures, different motivations that we can put into compensation plans and employee behavior, and capitalizing education. When I say capitalizing education, I mean that if, say, for example, an organization spends money on a professional development for, you know, changing the process of in an ERP system, or putting a different process in place for performance improvement, and we know that the professional development will most likely last us over 4 to 5 years. Well, why wouldn't we capitalize that investment over 4 or 5 years, just like we do a building, or just like we do you know, a software acquisition? So we're finally starting to understand this a little bit more. So these intangibles, and most generally, let's talk about knowledge and human capital, is an important driver in our growth. And we see that every day in our business. And we see that every day from economic theory and economic research. But these intangibles have been ignored for so long, and they continue to be ignored, but there's hope on the horizon. So we as executive leaders, and we as midline managers, and we as even individual contributors, if we can understand this and we can help change the beliefs and behaviors of the executives regarding the application of corporate cash to employee education. Many of you may know, some of you may not, but there's more cash on the balance sheets across the developed nations than there ever has been in the history of our world at this point, and because they don't know where to spend it. And part of the reason where they don't know where to spend it is they don't know how to measure the expense, measure the spend on human capital, because we've been negligent in understanding how to measure human capital. So these beliefs and behaviors at a firm level must shift in this new investment paradigm, where the risk and return are explicitly managed and explicitly measured. And this needs to be done from an immediate policy perspective, both from a nation level and from an organization level and from an accounting practices level. So again, in the effort to put some humor involved, we need to start with the beliefs. We need to change our behavior, which can give us results, and it all starts with us. And when I say us, I mean us understanding the issue, leaders understanding the issue, policymakers understanding the issue, and governments have a better understanding of the issue. So we need a movement for change, in which employers view investment in their staff via the skills and professional development as a long-term asset rather than a cost. And no better has that come up recently when we've had the shareholder spring over the last couple of years, where the media and people out on Wall Street have had enough with the CEOs and executive leaders making a tremendous amount of money on the backs of the individual contributors. So how do we value our talent? Executives have long recognized and understood Einstein's observation that not everything that counts can be counted. There's the intangible assets, and some of it can't be counted, but we can do a better job of counting intangible assets. We do it, such as goodwill. when we make an acquisition of a company, but these same conventions block us from quantifying, again, our most valuable asset, which is our people. So how do we make that change? Well, we're really in a perfect storm right now, and we've often heard of the FASB, which is the Financial Standards Boards in the U.S. Well, the IASB is the International Accounting Standards Boards, which is the international group, and they're finally starting to recognize here in 2013 that the economic benefits of human capital. So without dwelling on this a lot in the effort of time, they've started to standardize the verbiage as an asset must be capable of producing economic benefits, and those economic benefits need not be certain. And that's what the issue has been in measuring and valuing human capital as an asset, that it is not certain. So, but we are getting to the point where we can measure it with reliability. And again, important on how we measure human capital. So if we look at this perfect storm and we look at it from an integrated reporting perspective, the IASB considers 6 capitals that are composed of the resource and relationships that a company must rely on for their success. That is financial, manufactured, social, relationship, natural, and human. And we're going to focus on the human side, obviously from a human capital perspective. So if we look at the green where there's an external environment and the 6 capitals, they all go in as inputs. And there's opportunities and risks, there's performance, we have governance involved, we certainly have our own corporate business model where we have business activities and outputs and outcomes, where we have our strategy and resource allocation. And the resource allocation is big because from a professional development perspective, we're competing with R&D. We're competing with the people who want to build a new building, and we're competing with the IT department who wants to buy new software. So we all have, from a professional development perspective and a human capital allocation perspective, we need to understand that we need to be able to show that the investment in human capital is the most important thing. And then you can see our outputs not only to the organization but to society at large, which is very important. So what is the impact of this long-term value creation? Where you can see the inputs, you see a funding model, and you have the infrastructure, which we talked about in buildings or whether it's software. We have people. We have intellectual property, which is the R&D. We have raw materials, the things we manufacture, ecosystems, in our relationships. You know, the relationships are our partnerships that can be key to our successes. All the business activities that go into that, the outputs, and then the outcomes, whether it's customer satisfaction, profit and loss, shareholder return, asset consumption, job creation, employee development engagement, which is sort of a focus of this conversation, improved standard of living, environmental impact, and just the license to operate. So why do we measure? Why do we want to measure? And I hope it's becoming more clear. The human capital initiatives can be integrated into our overall operational framework. They can't be isolated. Most likely they need to be event-based. The measurement and analysis capture needs to capture the contribution of the human capital initiatives, and they need to establish accountability. And the accountability piece is key. You know, we now hopefully, through this conversation, or it's sort of a one-way conversation, I guess, I can't have this coming back to me, we now have a set of foundations for why we should measure human capital investment. Now let's sort of, discuss the how for the rest of this discussion. Most of us are aware and know of Kirkpatrick developed the 4 levels of measurement in 1959, and in the early 70s, Phillips added the 5th one, which was return on investment. But does this really work in today's complex environment? And is this something that your CFO will even consider? Will the CFO even consider using what Phillips has talked about from a return on investment perspective? So let's look at a framework for a typical project if we want to look at from a measurement perspective. One, we need to keep it simple. It needs to be understandable to the CFO. It needs to be understandable to your business unit leader on what's going to happen. We need to develop key organizational performance indicators, KPIs, that might be plausibly be affected by what we're trying to do. The analysis needs to be conducted with rigor that is expected in any academic or corporate setting. So there needs to be accountability, there needs to be rigor. Every effort needs to be made to ensure that the results are communicated clearly to all stakeholders. And the main stakeholders and sponsors need to be involved in setting up, if you will, the experiment up front to start the measurement. And the emphasis needs to be actionable, insightful, and it needs to be clear and simple and easily translatable into the business knowledge and executable initiatives that are tied back to your business outcomes. So what are the success factors in a measurement process? Well, there needs to be a project champion who must support the project to ensure is pursued to completion. In many projects that I've been involved in, there's been, a project leader, but not necessarily a project champion. And that project champion needs to live or die with the passion of the project. We need to discuss and conduct the pre-evaluation activity, the pre-test, post-test, if you will, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, to determine whether the program is ready for evaluation. And in many times, we need to understand if it is ready for evaluation, and thus conserving valuable time and money. Ensuring that the operational performance data is available to facilitate the quantitative and qualitative analysis. I've been involved in studies where we've wanted particular information from a corporation, and the particular business unit did not want to release the information to another business unit. And the professional development folks did not want to go up to the highest level to force the hand of the business unit to get the information, and thus the measurement couldn't take place, and thus the valuable professional development couldn't be done because they couldn't measure it to go get the budget to get it done. Include the project stakeholders, the ones who are going to be affected the most. And this is critical to the success of any measurement project. And we talked about identifying the goals and objectives and the KPIs. So identify the stakeholder interest and what they plan to use for the findings. We need to determine the organizational support for the evaluation. And this is important. Many times you might have a key project champion but the organizational support isn't there for evaluation. And that may be okay, but considering the amount of dollars that are going to be spent, it might be important to have an evaluation. Not every professional development project needs to be measured, but again, if it's key to the key performance indicators of the organization and the key business outcome, I'd like to think that you'd want to do that. Ensure contextual suitability of the available data. Ensure that the data related to the objectives and KPIs exists and is significant and is reliable and valid and accessible. And many times in measurement projects, let's just say we have the fox watching the hen house. We have the people designing and developing the professional development are in charge of the measurement. And the CFO says, what the hey, why is that, I'm really not comfortable with that. So a lot of times, or many times, you may need some outside organization to come and do to work with professional development to help in the measurement of the project. Use collaborative and participatory approaches, and the project obviously needs to be linked to some core purpose and values with the business outcomes. Those are the particular success factors. Isolation techniques. This is your pre-test, post-test. This is what drug companies do to test drugs with placebos. We need to, and real drugs. We need to set up the experiment. We need to have a test group with prior performance. We need to have a test group with post-performance and with demographically similar control groups. This may seem logical, but it doesn't necessarily happen very often. Again, more isolation techniques that are important. Environmental influences certainly affect the test and control group equally, and you need to make sure that they do both economic conditions, organizational objectives, benefits, leadership skills. Let me give you an example. Let's say we're going to roll out some multi-million-dollar sales training, and we want to measure it. And we want to have a control group that doesn't get the training, say, for 6 months, and we want to have a group that does get it right away, and we're going to measure it for 6 months. We need to make sure that the sales in the past have been similar. We need to make sure that the demographics are similar. We need to make sure the economic conditions are similar so that we can isolate the learning variable. And isolating the learning variable can be done using multivariate statistical analysis. This has been proven. People have been doing it for years. While it may seem complicated, it's not easy, but it's not that complicated. So this is a typical project deliverable. You have your stakeholder meeting with your project sponsor, and I don't think this is dissimilar to any other big project that's being managed. You know, high-level project plan, detailed project plan, a data audit, analysis, findings, and shareholder presentation. But each step along the way, you need to coordinate with the client to ensure that the deliverables are accepted. A typical example of a business outcome blueprint, it's very, very important. Very, very important. I can't emphasize it enough that you need to start with analyzing, having a business outcome. What business outcome do you want to achieve? And then what intervention objective is tied to the business outcome, and which then goes into your organizational data element that is going to be, you know, affected, which again will loop back to achieving the ultimate business outcome. So let's get down to some summary because we're running out of time here. superior human capital management can assist organizations understand the return on investment in people and how human capital investments affect the overall business. To be great at human capital management, it's a combination of that people instinct, and I'll call it a craft, and that we put the hard logic in there with our measurement data. And we need to tailor the measurement initiatives with context, with certain characteristics, and the quirks of the organization, so that it can be measurable and it works and ties back to our business outcomes. And if we can use our overall business intelligence, we can make this work. And establishing this great reputation by providing statistically accurate research and accountable information to all the decision makers is key. You need to be able to keep that reputation and provide that accuracy and provide that accountability, and the people from the top will believe you, and having that objective data will help make it happen. So with that, maybe we have about 8 minutes for some questions, and Kayla, maybe you can see what we have for questions.
Yeah, they're starting to come in already. So thanks, John, for that great presentation. As we just mentioned, we do only have a few minutes left. So as a reminder, if you do have a question for John, be sure to enter it into the Q&A module at this time. That's in the lower right-hand panel of WebEx. He covered a lot in just under an hour, and there's still a lot more information that we could discuss, so we encourage you to continue the conversation with him. John's contact information, as you can see, is available on this slide deck. And I'd like to remind everyone that the recording and the slides from today will be sent to the email address provided within 48 hours, so you don't have to worry about writing that down right now. We'll send this information to everyone with the slide deck in the email. It does look like we have a few questions coming in, so John, I'm just going to kind of facilitate these to you. One person just wrote in, this seems logical. Why aren't more organizations measuring human capital investment?
That's a great question. I think part of it is there's an expense to measuring that people don't want to incur, which I think is a mistake. I think it should be built into all larger projects. Two, I see this frequently, there are professional development leaders that don't want to measure because they're afraid of the results, and they know that, hey, my senior executive thinks this is working. Why do I want to screw this up by measuring? I see that quite a bit. Now that's changing because CFOs are starting to require the measurement. So those are two things right off the top of my head that come to mind.
Great. It's interesting. This one's actually on the opposite end. So this information seems very complicated. What is the best way that I can get started?
Well, we talked about keeping it simple, and using you can use pilot programs where doing measurement may be simpler, where you can have your control group with your group that you want to roll out the professional development to, and have say some initial measurement from a pilot program. So it doesn't have to be hard. Dip your toe in the water, or walk before you run. So there's ways to do it. There also are universities out there that will do these measurements as an outside group thing for quite reasonable, because they have students whether they're in their master's programs or PhD programs that need to do projects, and they will come in and help facilitate that and work with you to do that.
Great. So here's another one that just came in, and I hope I'm translating it correctly. But if we're trying to identify the expected business outcomes, how do you help customers identify, articulate it, and why we're asking?
I don't necessarily understand the question, but why don't you read it one more time, Kayla?
Okay. And Pat, feel free to chime in and type in again if I'm reading this incorrectly. But if we're trying to identify the expected business outcomes, how you help customers identify, articulate it, and why we're asking.
Well, I think you have to keep it that tie it back to the ultimate business outcome that, and I hope I'm answering the question that you.
I have a little bit more insight here too. That oftentimes, you know, people don't know why we, some GCP strategies, are asking the question, and they don't have access to necessarily the business goals. They don't necessarily know.
They don't necessarily know what the business goals are, and they've just been told, go do this training or professional development. Is that?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one, and I would suggest that you have the people, you know, the people go back to the business unit leaders and say, you know, why do you want me to do this? What business outcome am I trying to achieve? I want to help you have the most success. So what business outcome am I trying to achieve? And you can do that in an approachable way, in a sincere, passionate way, to saying that, you know, hey, I want to help. I want to give you the best training and professional development I can. How can you help me, you know, tie this to your business outcome so that you can be more successful? Hope that answers the question. Yep.
Yep. So the next question, what actual statistics are available showing how much revenue is gained, or what percentage of drop in turnover is delivered by investing X dollars in learning and development?
Well, that's where you need to set up the experiment. You need to take some, you know, you can even take some similar training that's been done in the past, and what revenues have been increased or what turnover has been decreased from an anecdotal perspective, and then measure, you know, your new training and development with a more objective piece to it, and where you can maybe isolate the learning variable so that you can show what you've done. So you don't have to necessarily have a control group, but you can have something that is similar in the past that you've done, and then measure the new thing going forward.
Great. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions coming in, and this does bring us to the end of the hour, so we'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. We do hope that you'll join us again on September 30th for our next GP Strategies webinar on Integrated Surround Strategy, the levers to increase and sustainable organizational capability. This session is actually going to be partnered with Vince Eugenio, a Senior Leader of Talent Development for Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and one of our talented training consultants, Karen Feiska. It'll be a great session, so we hope you join us. And thanks again to today's speaker, John Welsh. We really appreciated all of your insights today, and thank you to everyone who attended for your time and attention. For GP Strategies, I'm Kayla Rotz, and I wish everyone a great day.
Thank you all.